One of the things I disliked most about this house ever since I moved in was the location of the shed. It completely blocked the window of the smallest bedroom, providing a view of the side of the shed and its roof. Despite that, it had the best light in the house, which is why I moved my office to this room a couple of years ago. I've been thinking about moving the shed ever since I moved in, but I had no idea how to do it nor the means to make it happen. Then, while I was working on my new garden bed last fall, I got to talking with one of my neighbors, and he offered to help me when the time came. In early March, he came over and asked when we were going to move the shed. We agreed to move the shed on the next warm weekend that we had, and that weekend happened at the end of March. Before the shed could be moved, there were a few things that needed to happen. While I had moved most of the iris that were planted behind the shed last fall, I discovered a few more that I had missed, and also a rhubarb plant that was growing well. So on Friday morning, I dug them up and settled them temporarily into the main garden bed. The next step was to pull up the remaining metal edging that was around the shed. This was a challenge as I was still recovering from my broken arm and needed to do it one-handed. With the help of a crowbar and a heavy-duty pair of vice grips, I was finally able to pull out the 12-inch staples that held the edging in place and was then able to pull up the edging. Once the edging was out, I was able to bend it and fold it in half by stepping on it to make it easier to dispose of into the recycling bins. On Saturday morning, the day before we planned on moving the shed, I enlisted the help of family members to help me empty the shed. Thankfully, it didn't take us very long, but oh my goodness, what a lot of stuff. I have needed to downsize the shed for quite a while, and having everything out was going to make it so much easier, but there were other things to do first. With the shed empty, I decided to finish painting the interior with some leftover paint. I had started this last summer because the shed was a really dark hole, and it was very difficult to see things even in the middle of the day. I had a big bucket of leftover white paint, and so I got to painting. While working, I kept hearing a thumping from underneath the floor of the shed. I knew there had been at least one rabbit living under the shed, and sure enough, when I went to see what it was, there he was. He was not at all happy with all that was going on in the shed. He ran off, and I got back to work. I had made good progress when the neighbor came over and declared he was ready to move the shed, a day earlier than anticipated. I was concerned that my other two sons were not present to help, as I had been counting on their strength and capability. But my neighbor assured me that this wasn't a problem and it wasn't going to be a difficult job. The day before, he had brought over 3 good-sized logs to assist, and he had a floor jack with him. He slid this under the shed and then slid the logs underneath one at a time. It took a number of readjustments, lifting here, moving the logs, lifting there, moving the logs again, and so on. But once the 3 logs were in place, he lifted the shed slightly at the front end and got the shed moving. Just a few inches to begin with, but it was progress and so good to see. The dirt under the shed was pretty uneven, so we had to stop and level things out a few times and reposition logs a couple of times. I tried to assist as much as possible, but with one arm, I wasn't much of a help. We were a little bit stuck, but at that point another of our neighbors stopped to see what we were doing and stepped in to help. And first thing you know, that shed just slid right back. A few more shoves brought it into its final position a bit closer to the house. Then it was time to level the shed. We wanted to keep the sides from touching the ground like it had before, and so using pieces of pressure-treated wood that I had left over from building the first garden bed, we were able to lift and level the shed appropriately. It's now nice and stable, and I'll be able to add a skirting around the bottom to keep Mr. Rabbit and his friends from living underneath it. In all, it only took about 45 minutes to move and level the shed. Truly amazing. I could never have done it without the help of both my neighbors, and I'm so deeply grateful for their assistance. Truly the best of neighbors. Once we were finished moving the shed, I finished painting the interior. It isn't a perfect job. It is just a rough shed after all. But now it's so much brighter inside, and I'll be able to see what I'm after so much easier. We put the shelves and toolbox back into their correct positions and moved all the stuff inside that needed to be secured overnight. On Sunday, I was able to sort through everything and do some downsizing at last. Then more family members came and helped me get the rest of the stuff moved back in and organized in the shed. Now that the shed is in its proper place, I can get to work on building the second garden bed and complete the arbor. Once that's in place, there's a pile of dirt to move, and then the area between the driveway and shed will need leveled and new pavers put down. But all of those things are for future videos. The best part is that now I have a lovely view from my office window. The kitties and I are enjoying the increased light and the improved view so much. I've done a lot to upgrade this house since I've been here, but I think that moving the shed and putting in the garden beds are my favorite of all. I love being able to sit at my desk and enjoy the view of my garden while I'm working. Thank you so much for following along today. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.